everyone. So like Sparky, I'm not from the UK. As much as I try to make my British accent sound amazing. I'm from North, so I think we're getting closer to the UK as we go. I'm from Canada originally, and I was with Deloitte in Canada before I moved over. I also come from the business side, so was in consulting and now I've moved into well-being. And you all are probably wondering how this links to diversity, but I swear it will make sense in a few. I'm also going to try to make this morning's talk a little bit more interactive. So would welcome audience participation because I will pick on people. All right, so to start off, before I get into the slides, I just have one question for everyone, which is, what does well-being mean to you? So anyone, thoughts, words, just kind of shut them out or raise your hand or whatever. What does well-being mean to you? Yeah?
Feeling good.
Yeah? Any others?
Health.
Yeah? Others?
Mental and there's physical health. There's two aspects to it.
Yeah? Others?
Stability.
Okay. And a couple more. Yeah. Say that again?
Balance.
Okay. Any others?
Being okay with yourself.
Yeah. Okay, so now you can imagine, we haven't heard from everyone in the room, but we've heard from a handful. And the words have all been different. And it's funny because if you actually go into Google and type in what does well-being mean or definition of well-being, I'll just put up some of the definitions that come up. This is only a handful of them. So I'll just leave them up and have you read through them. Any ones that resonate most with people and or stick out or jump at you?
Being comfortable and happy and healthy.
Yeah. The point of the exercise is in asking you guys to kind of identify what well-being means to you, and then also to recognize that actually this is only a handful of what was through the Google search. I mean, I could have gone on and probably created like a 100-page slide deck on what people actually define well-being as. It points the question as actually the definition of well-being is so subjective and actually so diverse in nature because it's just as diverse as each one of us are and the needs that we'll each have from a well-being standpoint. Which lends itself this question of how do we solve the well-being debate and or conundrum in our businesses, which for a lot of small businesses are very easy because it's smaller teams, easier to set a culture. But in large enterprise organizations like a Deloitte, like Accenture, like some of the other places that are represented today, it's a lot harder to make it stick. You have a lot more people that need to feel it, and with a tone at the top, it's the most important thing, but it's harder sometimes to trickle down and get people to actually feel it. And alongside understanding the fact that everyone is quite diverse and has different needs, there's another thing that lends itself to the whole, why do we need to even look at well-being? So why is well-being important and why has it become so important? Just gonna start by putting up a few statistics. I'll add to them, but I'll have you guys have a look at some of them. Any thoughts on any of the statistics on that slide? Anything that jumps out at you?
Stress.
Stress, yeah? Anything that you resonate with or that you've kind of seen come to light in your businesses or organizations?
Mental health covers most of those issues. There's a couple of physical, but it's mostly mental.
Yeah,
That workplaces aren't supporting people in the way that they need to be.
yeah. Any other thoughts? I mean, I was doing a presentation for our new graduates on Monday, and I picked out the one that says 1 in 4 say work is a source of anxiety. And in the room of 250 new grads, it's like that's 1 in 4. And I'll say the same thing here. That's 1 in 4 of each one of us here. It's something that we're all feeling. And actually, the best thing I ever heard last year, I was at a well-being conference, was that in a lot of ways, these are all societal statistics, right? These are all coming from surveys and studies and so on that have been done. But actually, when people walk into their businesses, they don't, like, this stuff doesn't stop at the door. It comes in with them. And while a lot of it talks about workplace anxiety or stress and things that are happening in the workplace, there's a lot of stuff at home people are dealing with that they equally are bringing into the office, which means as organizations, we're not immune to it. You know, we don't have these like magical glass bubble walls that when you walk through, all of the bad stuff kind of stops and people can just work. They're carrying it day in, day out. And whether or not they recognize it, it's there, and it's showing up in what they're doing every day. It's showing up in their work. It's showing up in terms of how they perform and how they show up as themselves. And there's often not a safe platform to have the conversation. And so it makes the debate that actually as businesses, we're responsible to our people, and our people are dealing with some of the stuff that's on these slides right now. So the question is, how do we solve it? And the reality is, much like the diversity question, it's nowhere near perfect. I think organizations are starting to definitely jump on this, and there's a lot of really good examples of what organizations have done. But there's no real gold standard. We're all kind of in this, let's figure it out together kind of thing. And I really liked what Sparky said, because I think a big piece of it is, let's just talk about it and hear about what people are doing and how we can kind of learn from one another and see what they've done. And so what I want to share with you is some of the things that I've learned in helping to set the strategy for our consulting practice, what some of the things are that I think have really helped make it, I don't know, successful in some ways, have helped make it stick, but also some of the things that I've learned along the way that I'm still striving for and pushing for in the business that I represent. So, starting first with leadership buy-in, which also was mentioned in the inclusion equation. Leadership buy-in is so important. It's not so much as a tick box exercise, which is what it used to be. Oftentimes, well-being is looked at as a part or component of HR. And it's not to say that that's wrong, but it's to say that actually it can't just be HR driven, because people, like if I look at our new graduates that started on Monday, are walking into the business and looking at partners and senior managers and directors and leaders in the business as role models. And that's what's helping them to think, like, do I want to be that in X number of years? And is that the kind of life I want to live? And also, am I working with someone that I feel like will understand and be able to support me with the things that I'm dealing with? And so that buy-in is really important. I mean, like, just getting leaders in our business to actually be able to mimic some of that stuff, to understand what everyone's going to need it's really hard, because oftentimes, like if I just look at Deloitte as an example, our partners started working 20, 25 years ago. They grew up in a completely different generation. For them, topics like mental health, whether or not people dealt with it or not, wasn't talked about. And now it's trending on social media, right? So it's so different for the new generation coming in. And it's how do we bring those two generations together? And a big piece of that is just having that more senior generation starting to be able to mimic some of that stuff. The next one is clarity and messaging, objectives and your focus. Well-being, like we went through the beginning with definitions, is so broad, and it is such a minefield. And you can get into the topic and then that's it, like you're completely sucked in like a vacuum. And a big piece of it is understanding, like, how do we actually define it for our business? What are we actually trying to achieve? What are the like handful of things that we want to make sure we walk out of this year with, or these next few months with, having touched or hit on for our business, and what's important to them? So for example, our strategy, we look at well-being as mind, body, and purpose, and we look at those pillars, and we defined each of those pillars, and then everything kind of comes back to it. But it's just clarity on what are we trying to achieve and what are we focusing on, so people understand and then can come along with you on the journey, be able to provide feedback, all that kind of stuff. Focus on where you can create lasting change. So, I mean, everyone loves a yoga class on a Wednesday in the office. They also like things like a free fitness class or a discount at some sort of a fitness membership or whatever. But the reality is the lasting changes aren't in the nice, snazzy benefits. They're in the operational stuff. So how do I change my day-to-day so that it feels like, it actually feels like well-being is embedded into it? So as a business, we have a really hard time doing that, because actually Monday to Thursday, our people are at projects. They're traveling, they're on the road, and every project is a different culture. and it sets a different tone. So it's how do we make it look like it's a little bit consistent so that actually the way we're working starts to feel like it's really supporting people. So what are our operational policies in place? How are we changing the face of the leadership on the ground and how we run our day-to-day practices? So it's starting to think about those things that actually will start to really build the culture from the bottom up. And determining what interventions make sense. So this goes back to the whole diversity thing, and I think I'll probably harp on this the most, is personalization, which I think is another point that comes in later, is really important. Like, every intervention is going to be different for every organization. The reality is, if I go back again to our estate, people are on projects from Sunday, Monday to Thursday. They're traveling, they're on the road. Therefore, something like intervention-wise that wouldn't work for them if compared to an office, that has employees coming in Monday to Friday sitting at the same desk every day is very different. And so the best piece of advice or thing that I think really helps is just understanding your workforce. And as a result of understanding your workforce, their patterns, what it looks like for them, then think about what interventions make sense. It's been really helpful for me to have come from the business side because I understand what our people are going through on a day-to-day. I mean, I've lived it, I've breathed it. I mean, I lived out of a suitcase for over 10 years, so you kind of just know what it's like and what that lack of stability means for everyone. But it's really understanding, and in a business, it means it's going to be different for HR, it's going to be different for the tech guys, it's going to be different for the client-facing people, but segmenting and really understanding your workforce. Communications, also key. So it's really great if you have a great strategy and focus and all that kind of stuff, but if you're not communicating to your people and letting them know what you're doing, nobody will know. We have a whole host of benefits that we offer to our people, and nobody really knows that half the time these benefits are available. I think I go to meetings sometimes and people are like, did you know we get this? And I was like, nope, never heard of it, never been able to find it on the internet, never been able to identify it. And so oftentimes there's lots of really great things that businesses are offering, but people just don't know about it. So it's just communicate. And pilot and test things out. That's the one thing I can say. Like, I am by no means an expert. I am totally learning this as I go along. And as much as I can learn from my colleagues and peers and the people that work within the business by talking to them, the other thing is I just won't know what's going to work until I test it out. And I think there's no harm in saying, let's just test it out for a few months. If it doesn't work, we pull it. And at least we can say that we've done it, we've tried it, and we have something to say that, it didn't work, it did work, and then we can move on to the next. But it's testing it out, getting the feedback, understanding from your people, and just not being afraid to kind of be bold with the things that you decide to do. And then we touched on the personalization bit. So the only thing I'll add to that is just, even if you can't you'll never be able to create a strategy that will fit for everyone. But it's embedded into that. How can you create opportunities for people to get what they want through sources of personalization? So thinking, for example, of like if you offer your people something like a well-being credit, you're giving them X amount of money a year, they can go decide what they want to do with it within the constraints of anything sort of well-being oriented that you define. Therefore, people can figure out what works for them and what doesn't. Headspace isn't going to stick for everyone. Not everyone likes meditation or going for runs or riding their bike to work. So it's just understanding what people need. And that's just a summary of them. I mean, there's a whole host of things, and I probably haven't touched on all of them. I also know that I'm running out of time if I'm not over time. But the one thing I will say is, it's probably links to the whole diversity equation, is really get curious about understanding your people, what well-being means to them, and the diverse needs that they're going to have under the whole well-being debate. And then design something according to that works for them in that way. Thank you.